All right, so we're going to take a look at this really super cool bug problem because I like to collect bugs. I do. So a bug crawls a distance of n miles at a speed of n plus 1 miles. Now already I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, there are a lot of words here. If I don't make some sort of organizing table, I'm going to forget or lose track of things that are going on. So that's what I'm going to do first. So let's say we have n miles at a speed of n plus 1. So I know that rate times time is equal to distance. All right. And so right now it said a distance of n and at a rate of n plus 1. Does that make sense? Oh my goodness, I wrote it under time. N plus 1. Okay. All right. You pull the door. And then it goes on to say that on one day, and then it crawls 2n plus 1 miles. So that's 2n plus 1 miles at a speed of n squared plus n. Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. And it says that we've gone a total of 6 hours. Boy, am I glad I know that rate times time equals distance. I don't have time, but I have rate and I have distance. So if I do a little algebra, I know that distance divided by rate is equal to time. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So that means, I'm going to change colors here to go with my parts. That means that n over n plus 1 will describe my first day in terms of time. And on my second day, we know that 2n plus 1 over n squared plus n describes my time for the second day. And I have a sum of 6 hours, which means n over n plus 1 plus 2n plus 1 over n times n plus 1, I'll talk about this in a second, is equal to what? 6 hours. Now, why is it okay for me to write n times n plus 1?
Because it's the greatest common monomial.
I factored out the greatest common monomial. And I have two fractions that I must add together. And so, oops, I want that back. So to add two fractions together, what must be true of my two fractions? They have to have a common denominator. Excellent. So we have an n plus 1 in both denominators. What's the only piece that's missing from this denominator?
N.
Another n. So I'm going to multiply the first fraction by n over n, because n divided by n is 1. So that gives me n squared plus 2n plus 1 all over n times n plus 1, and that is equal to 6. That's what I've done so far. So I am at this point, and I'm thinking to myself, great. Let's solve this. Now, it is a quadratic. I know I can solve quadratics. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at this top term, n squared plus 2n plus 1, and you know what? Between you and me, I think we can factor that. What? I do. I'm willing to bet that n plus 1 times n plus 1 would equal n squared plus 2n plus 1. Because 1 times 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So I can go ahead and factor it in that manner. Oh, gee, golly gee willikers. I know. Look, I have n plus 1 in the numerator and the denominator. What is n plus 1 divided by n plus 1? 1. Exactly 1. So I can go ahead and I can cancel this out. So I have n plus 1 over n is equal to 6. Well, what will I do to both sides to get this n over here? Multiply by n. So I get n plus 1 is equal to 6n. Subtract n. So when I subtract n from both sides, I will get 1 is equal to 5n. Therefore, n is equal to 1/5. No, that's not the answer, but it'll help me get to the answer. Because if there isn't a math counts problem with less than 24 steps that I'm supposed to be able to do in a minute and 20 seconds, I'm going to go home crying in disgust and frustration. Okay, so with that in mind, what is my n value? 1/5. So I'm going to erase the work. I'm going to keep this table, though. So erase the work, keep the table, and I'm going to remember that n is equal to, and I need you to keep repeating n is equal to 1/5 because in my geriatric condition, I'm liable to forget that. All right, so you can smile, it's okay. All right, so, and we are trying to figure out what is the bug's average speed, right? That's what I'm trying to find in this problem. And you know your average speed is going to be your distance divided by time. So we need to find our distance, and we know the time already, right? Okay, so what is my distance on the first day? 1/5. What is the distance on my second day? 1 2/5. Okay. What is my total distance? Well, 1 times 5 is 5. 5 plus 2 is plus 1. So on the total thing, how far have I gone? 8. I've gone 8/5 of whatever unit that we're talking about. So I want you to take a moment to digest this. All right, so this is our distance, correct? And we said that rate is equal to distance divided by time, right? I have my distance. Do I have my time? 6 hours. So we need to divide these two terms. So dividing by a fraction, same as multiply by the reciprocal. So we have 8/5 times 1/6, which is equal to 8 over 30. What goes into 8 and 30? 2. So this is equal to 4/15. Oh yeah, that's the answer.